Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Both of our guests today join us from the beautiful city of Miami in Florida. First, please welcome to the show, Silvia Lopez. Silvia, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thanks for being here. Also on the line with us from Miami is Susan Rose. Susan, how are you?
Fabulous.
And both of our guests are the authors of Jose Y El Perro, a soon-to-be series of picture books. Congratulations, my friends.
Thank you so much. I was just going to say, actually, it's an easy reader, which is a term I didn't know much about until I met Silvia. I had always envisioned the book as being a picture book, but Silvia convinced me that it should be an easy reader, which is quite different because the easy reader is a special format designed for children who are learning to read. So beginning readers had controlled vocabulary and a limited number of words. Also, the illustrations in the easy reader show exactly what the text from the page describes to help the reader figure out the words.
Right. So we'd like to shout out to Gloria Felix, our illustrator. She did a beautiful job in this book, and she illustrates the second one as well.
Well, Silvia, I'm glad that Susan made the distinction to let us know that this isn't a picture book. It's an early reader, and share with us a little bit about the differences between a picture book and an early reader. And one of the distinctions that she mentioned that caught my ear is the fact that the illustrations in an easy reader are depicting exactly what the words are saying, which is slightly different than a picture book, where the story is told with both the words and the pictures, and neither are really complete without the other.
Right, absolutely. The distinction is, first of all, I'll make the distinction about size. Okay, the easy readers or early readers are smaller because they're child size, and they have a limited a number of pages, and they're also controlled vocabulary, which is something that Susan already mentioned. And that is that you have all these reading scales, so lexile levels and things like that. And if you want an easy reader to be kept within a certain level, then you have to control that vocabulary so that it makes it accessible to a certain group of children, a certain age level. Yeah. And that's the difference. Although really the illustrations can be just as beautiful, just as nice. Picture books have a tendency to, just the illustrations can be a little bit more flight of fancy type of thing. But in the, as Susan mentioned, in the early readers or easy readers, the illustrations are meant to assist with the reading. Mm-hmm. That's another difference right there.
Yeah. This is really, I think it's really important, and I'm happy because I'm learning so much being the host of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We just celebrated our 6th anniversary, and I'm still learning things because the world of kids' books is so big, and it really is, not fragmented isn't quite the word I'm looking for, but there are very many different categories in children's picture books, and I think it's pretty important for, especially teachers, and librarians already know this stuff, but I think it's also important for parents to start learning about these distinctions as their kids grow and as they're selecting great books for their kids to read. Was this something, Susan, for you that was really a surprising kind of learning curve to discover that, wow, it's just not writing a story with pictures. It's like really a process.
Well, it was a learning curve for me because this is my first book. And I would say I'm not really a writer, but I'm a great storyteller. I produce Broadway shows and movies. So I know how a story needs to have a beginning, middle, and end. And most of my projects in those arenas has been character driven. I'm thrilled that I was able to get this book published because I know how hard it is for people to have books published. And thankfully I met Silvia Lopez, and she helped me get the book published. I had this idea because I used to drive back and forth to New York City and leave my puppy Brady with my Latina pet sitter and her son Jose. And when I picked him up at the end of the day, I used to joke and say, wow, I think this dog is going to be bilingual. And then I thought, ding, 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 maybe that would make a great book for children, an introduction to Spanish for English-speaking children. So that's how the idea came about. And it took me a long time, almost 8 years. So I just want to say to everybody out there, if you're an aspiring writer, you have to keep going. And during the pandemic, I was lucky enough to meet through a friend, Silvia, who loved the idea and decided she would become my co-author. And it's been a wonderful collaboration. And I'm thrilled that Jose is going to be out in the world in April. We decided to, I would say, sprinkle it with Spanish words. So it's not a true translation into Spanish. So you're reading a book that's in English, sprinkled with Spanish words, to give a child an introduction to Spanish and a curiosity, and maybe that will make him want to learn another language.
Yeah. I think that is a fantastic idea. Silvia, I don't know if you're I'm oftentimes baffled. My beautiful wife is a retired teacher in the city of Boston and taught mostly Latino kids, was a bilingual teacher until bilingual wasn't a thing anymore. But one of the things that I learned from her and from her different colleagues is that there's a fair amount of parents out there that are hostile towards the idea of kids being bilingual, which blows my mind. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's so many benefits to being bilingual, not just English and Spanish, but English and Mandarin or Portuguese or any different language. It's just a real benefit. Can you expand on that idea a little bit?
Well, absolutely. I live in Miami. Miami is a highly Latino, Hispanic, Spanish-speaking city at this time. It was not so when I came in 1960. I came in 1960 at the age of a week before my 10th birthday, and I did not have a word of English, not one. And so I came into school. I was the only child who didn't speak English in my entire class, and the other two kids in the school were my cousins. So there was nobody who spoke. Now you find everybody, but at the time, no. And luckily, I had a wonderful, wonderful Irish American teacher who made it a point that I was going to pass my 5th grade to 6th grade, and she saw that I was a dedicated student, and she made it a point that I would learn English that year, and I did. And I took off with that so much that I studied. My major was English. I mean, but then I became a school librarian, and I think that's what makes us, Susan and I, makes us a very good combination. As she was saying, she comes from a different perspective, and I come from a different perspective. And when you put them together, I think we've made a very good collaboration. I spent over 3 decades surrounded by children and children's books. So I know them well, and I know what children like to read. About bilingualism, this has become with the new idea of diversity. It has become more popular, but I have certainly encountered parents who do not want to introduce their young children to a second language. In both camps, I have seen Hispanic parents who speak only Spanish and want their little preschoolers only to speak Spanish and don't want them to speak English because they say they're going to be confused. And I've seen the other way around. And there's been so much written about this that has debunked this myth. Susan and I were talking the other day, if you have a child with a hearing deficiency, you will teach them American Sign Language. That's another language too. Mm-hmm. And yet to speak as well if they can. And nobody confuses anything. Mm-hmm. The more that you give the children at an early age, especially, the more benefit that you're making. You're really giving them a whole expansion of what they can get, because they're like little sponges at that age. Mm-hmm. I don't think, it has been already, the scientists have already seen, or the scholars or whoever, the educators, it doesn't make any difference. My children grew up completely bilingual. My husband and I are bilingual. And, it was funny because I was thinking the other day, our dogs and cats have always understood what we say. We say, come on, bang, 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 come on. And they get it. So why wouldn't a child? Mm-hmm. So we think that exposing them to a different language, and like you say, it can be anything. Yeah. Another language at an early age is advantageous. So these parents who don't think so, I think they should read the literature because it really is.
I was just going to also say, it's so much harder to learn a second language when you're my age. I was Zooming with a Spanish tutor in Barcelona during the pandemic, and I couldn't remember one thing from one week to the next. So I think it's so much easier to learn a second language when you're a child. They learn it faster and easier. There's also been so much research that a second language at a young age helps cognitive advantages such as increased problem-solving skills and creativity. And it just helps their brain when you're age 5 or younger. It helps them acquire a second language, and they have more control over their ability to shift from one image to another, which stems from shifting quickly between two languages. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of research on this, and I think that's a mistake if you don't expose your child to a second language, and at least let them, have the opportunity to learn it if they want.
And in my case, I was thrown into the deep end. I had to learn it or else. And I realized later that, and this I've done all my life, when I was trying to gain English, I would sometimes know a word in Spanish that was very similar to that English word that I was trying to decipher. And so I would make the connection between the two languages, and that immediately increased my English vocabulary, because then I knew what the word meant because I knew it in Spanish, because, we have many, many similar words in many languages. Mm-hmm. Europeans, you never catch a European child that doesn't know more than one language. Right. It's just, everywhere you go, the schools make a point and parents make a point. They will learn more than one language. There's close proximity to other countries, and so very often for work purposes later on, they do this. Yeah. So shouldn't we? Now, our particular book, and I'd like to make this distinction here, there's two terms that are bandied about a lot. It's dual language and bilingual. In the book world, they're used interchangeably, but in my estimation, and I think Susan agrees with this, they're not exactly the same. I think if you read the book Jose Y El Perro, you will see that they're a bilingual family. They will speak both languages. In a book, we have seen books where they have the English story and then the Spanish story, either on the same page or facing pages. Mm-hmm. One page will be in one language and one will be in the other. I don't think that that's a terrible thing, and I know wonderful authors who write like that. I'm just not a problem with that. But our concern is families. If you have a family that wants to share the book with a child, and that family either doesn't speak English or doesn't speak the second language, sharing becomes a little bit more difficult. So I think our book, and I have another one written like that, that it sprinkles words into the text. It's not only does it expose the children, it exposes the parents. So they have more something in common now that they know new words together. They learn new words together. And, it makes it easier for a family to read this text and be able to learn new words. And we make it easy in our book, which I think is also very important. The book doesn't just have gratuitous words. We have the definition or the explanation of the word in the text, in context, and also in the illustrations. So we also have a glossary in the back. So one word you can't make out, okay, that you look in the back. For the most part, it's very easy to decipher the story just by reading it together, just by reading it aloud, and then eventually the child will read it on their own.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the difference between them. I like the bilingual stories that have one language with the second language words sprinkled in, and that's exactly what Susan and I set out to do, and that's why I really love our two Jose books. I think they're not only are they fun, there's the bonding between a boy and the care that he takes of his animal, of his dog. The dog comes from a shelter, so that's another good point that we're trying to make there. These parents look very different to each other. The family is very different looking, which is great because that's exactly what our groups look like. And so I really like this story. I think it has come out very, very well. Both are very likable characters, the boy and his dog. And there's a real love bond there between them. And then to have the added bonus that you're learning new words in a second language. Wow, it just doesn't get any better than that. So I'm really privileged to be part of this project.
Somebody even mentioned the book is kind of like Dora the Explorer, the very popular television show, because that show did the same kind of thing. It had Spanish integrated throughout each program.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's when it began.
Yes.
I'd like to say too that I think I read that children who are exposed to a second language are exposed to more than the language. They're exposed to the culture of that second language.
Right.
If it's a book that's English Arabic and it discusses certain things, certain customs and traditions, that child will be learning about another culture at the same time. And if you appreciate that, I think that it makes a child more tolerant later on in life. You become a little bit more open-minded about all the wonderful, wonderful melting pot or salad that we have in the United States. So I think a whole bunch of added benefits.
Yeah. Well, I agree. My kids grew up in a dual culture family, and they're not bilingual in the sense that they're fluent in both English and Spanish, but they can comprehend whatever Spanish they are hearing, and they just need a little bit more practice in speaking Spanish, more confidence. They're actually, their spoken Spanish is very strong. They just don't have the confidence. They're worried about making a mistake, unlike their dad, who has no problem making a mistake in any language at all. We want to make sure that we know where we can go to find out more about Jose Y El Perro and find out more about both of our great authors. So first, Silvia, where can we go to find out more about you?
Well, I have a website. It's SilviaLopezBooks.com. Silvia's written with an I in the Spanish way. And I have about 11 or 12 books published. The two that are coming out this year with Susan. I have another one coming out next year with the Hatchet Group. And hopefully, I have written books for the school market that I've written a couple of biographies, including one about Lin-Manuel Miranda. And those are for the school market, so I think they're sold directly to schools, or schools just simply, sign up for those programs. But they were a lot of fun to write. I keep going. I do a lot of school presentations. I do Zoom all over the country. I have met so many teachers and librarians and children all over the country from coast to coast.
And Susan, where can we go to find out more about you?
I have a website called SusanRoseProductions.com. And I have a new show going up with Justin Peck from New York City Ballet and Sufjan Stevens. Justin was enamored of Sufjan Stevens' concept album, Illinois, and he decided he wanted to do a theatrical piece with it. So, we're putting it up at Bard in Rhinebeck this summer. Then it will go on to Chicago and other places before coming into New York.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing.
Yes.
We've had a really great time speaking to the authors of Jose Y El Perro, Silvia Lopez, and Susan Rose. My friends, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and we hope that you'll join us for the next exciting episode of the show. To make sure you don't miss a moment of the show, please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. Big thanks going out to my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Jordan Saley, Will Cheever, Cassandra Masonet, Stephanie Davila. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.